At the beginning of the 1900s, our knowledge was doubling approximately every 100 years or so. By the mid-century, we were doubling that knowledge, that information, every 50 years. Today, it is estimated to be doubling every 12 months. And we can see that within the next 5 years, we're going to be doubling approximately every 12 hours. So our world is certainly accelerating, and we need to be able to respond to this challenge. Now, in today's world, our ability to carry out some instinct or some value that we see means we have to go through a software stack. Every organization is really a technology organization. That means that we need to be able to master this technology in order to be able to achieve that value that we're seeking. Now, when it comes to the speed with which organizations move, there is a stark difference here between the leaders and your average. When it comes to the measurements of 5 years ago, we could see that the leaders were moving hundreds of times faster than your average organization. That means that presented with a challenge, they can respond in hours as opposed to months. Now, some of the latest data shows an even bigger breach. We have here the movement of leading organizations thousands of times faster than the average, which means that they can respond in minutes as opposed to months. So this is clearly something that we need. Now, referencing that number when it came to data, we can see that the world is accelerating at a pretty high pace. 90% of all the data that we have has been produced in the last 2 years, and our ability to take advantage of it is approximately 1%. So there's a lot there on the table, a lot of low-hanging fruit that we could make use of. Now, if you want to see the platforms that are supporting some of these practices, that are providing some of that automation, some of that speed, you can see platforms such as GitHub. It has a tremendous representation from industry. Over 80% of the Fortune 100 are already active on this platform. We can see that over 73 million developers are active on the platform as well. And if we are to look at some of the fastest moving infrastructure when it comes to our ability to be able to develop digital products, we can see platforms such as NPM. In this platform, you have well over 30 billion downloads of the tools of the infrastructure that you have in this ecosystem, over 100 billion per month. So tremendous momentum, tremendous amount of activity, all of it accelerating in this environment, making use of this new infrastructure. In today's world, being able to achieve value of an idea is at the other side of creating software. And when we think about creating software, historically, there have been two distinct groups: those that create the software and those that operate, maintain the software. Now, at a pretty high level, this may not seem like it's that difficult to bring these two groups together, to have them understand each other's concerns. But in reality, these have been, in the past, very different organizations with very different goals in mind. And so let's go a little bit deeper into what these two groups are. If we think about the creators, you have to first understand what it is that you're going to build. You have to come up with requirements, you have to plan, then you actually have to write the syntax, you have to write the code. Once you do that, there's a process in bringing all of the different pieces together, and then you need to test them. You need to do quality assurances, quality engineering, or some of the other names that go through this. Now, at that point, there's a clear handoff that has happened historically. When you do a release where you transfer knowledge to the group that will be running and operating of what is required in order to be able to do this. Now, once that group gets it in hand, they have to think about deployment. They have to think about things like scalability, robustness, geography, latency, security, many others that perhaps were not as pressing when the software was created. Now, once that software is in place, it needs to be operated, and ultimately not just operated, but you need to monitor it as well. You need to have a sense of what's happening. So as you can see there, that handoff and those two operations have historically had very different concerns, and there has been a divide of sorts. A different guild or a different group that is addressing each of these concerns. And a lot of what DevOps has become has to do with bringing those two groups together. Because ultimately, it's not about mastering deployment and scalability or about creating really great software and with really good practices. It's really about achieving value. And so when you write software, you should write it with maintenance in mind. You should write it with operation and monitoring in mind. Why? Because ultimately, this will expedite that cycle that you need to go through. So there has been what is often called a shift left when it comes to the responsibilities, integrating those two groups, eliminating titles in many organizations to be able to create that group that really is thinking together from the outset and understands each other's concerns and can get to value at a quicker velocity. When it comes to DevOps maturity, there are a number of levels that organizations go through. Like most things, it takes time and it takes practice. At the very first level, you have your traditional organization. You still have that data center inside of your organization. You're not making use of the public clouds and their automation. And because of it, you have a lot of challenges. You have a big separation between your development organization and that operates and runs your software. You are not deploying very frequently, not surprising because there's a lot of challenges that you have to overcome, and you're doing so every couple or months or so. You also have a large number of manual steps, well over 20. This is something that you want to minimize as soon as possible. And so it is a pretty challenging environment. Now, at your next level, at your level 2, you have a migration to the cloud. Many organizations arrive here, even if it's just at the lift and shift, often called your mess for less, on the cloud. Even if you've just done that lateral move, you still have the opportunity to take advantage of a lot of the automation and features that the cloud offers. And because of it, you can start to accelerate, even if you have still many of the same processes in place. Now, at the third step, now you're taking advantage of the best practices of the cloud. Now you're taking advantages of the resources that are available in the open source community. Now you've lowered your number of manual steps to perhaps 3 or so, which is quite a difference. And because of it, you can achieve speeds of every 2 weeks or so. And that's a great thing to have. However, you still have manual judgment, you still have human intervention, you still cannot do rollbacks in a confident way. It requires quite a bit of human doing in order to do that. And you want to be able to call back because this impacts your ability to be able to experiment and test how something does. And if you can do that in a very quick way, this helps you in your speed and flexibility and understanding of the marketplace. Now at level 4, now we're talking. Now you have a great deal of more automation. You have no manual steps. You can deploy and pull back, do recalls of that software in an automated fashion. You have modified as well your infrastructure and your architecture. So a lot of that lift and shift that originally happened when you went to the cloud has been redesigned into a more robust, cloud-friendly, scalable architecture. Now at that last level, the 5th level that I mentioned, you have all the nice to haves. You have the ability, for example, of do partial deployments. That means you can start out with 5% of your traffic in parallel to your other application. You can experiment and turn those dials up or down. You can do what is often called canary, as in canary in the mine type of deployments. You have no manual steps, obviously, because you've gone through a great deal of automation. You have incorporated the practices of chaos engineering. That is, you purposely downgrade or take down pieces of your infrastructure to be able to understand your robustness. So at this level, you are a mature DevOps practice that is fully taking advantage of the cloud and that has incorporated the best practices that exist when it comes to flexibility, speed, security, robustness of industry. Now, when it comes to DevOps, there's many organizations I speak to that say, don't worry, we've got it covered. We're an agile organization. Well, I wish it was that easy, right? It's really about creating value, not about mastering any one methodology. And really, when it comes to methodology, there's 4 we could think of. There's waterfall that everybody dreads. There's agile, lean, Kanban, and there's others. And think of them in terms of what you know about the problem and what you know about the solution. If you know what the problem is and you know what the solution is, Kanban is a perfect methodology. We've been there before, we know what the problem is, we know what the solution, what the technologies are that we can use. So it's perfectly fine. On the other side of the spectrum, when it comes to not knowing the problem and not knowing the solution, Lean is a great methodology, and you can see how it has increased in relevance over the years. Now, when it comes to Agile, there's a lot of criticisms of it because really a lot of times it becomes about being really good at Agile as opposed to delivering value. And when it comes to one of the classic examples, you can see here Nokia. In 2010, Nokia was looked up at conferences as the poster child of who were the best at doing Agile. And we all know what happened to Nokia, right? So in this case, it is not that it's bad, is what do you know about the problem and the solution? If you know what the problem is, Agile is a good methodology, even if you do not know the solution. However, the other ones that I mentioned may be a better fit. And depending on what you're trying to do, one might be better or the other in how much you know of the problem and how much you know of the solution. Of course, in today's world, as I mentioned, we prefer Lean because it doesn't assume anything. Now, ultimately, when it comes to being able to achieve your desired solution, your value, you're talking once again about people, processes, and technology. Where are you going to get your talent? This is a global war for those that have that skill set today. What tools are you going to use? Technology matters, and it matters a great deal. So it's not just about management strategies. It's really about what tools are you using. The differences are stark. The differences in productivity are off the chart as well. If you were to write in Fortran from the 1970s with the tool set that provided you versus working in something like JavaScript today, you'd be miles away. You'd be, exponentially more productive. Now, a lot of this depends again on that people, process, and technology. And as you move to the cloud, and certainly these new modern environments, you have very different processes. Remember, what you do will not change, but how you do it will. Many roles will go away, many positions will go away. And so ultimately, this is what makes technology and being able to derive value from it so challenging and so rewarding and so stimulating, because there is an ample set of possibilities here that you can fine-tune to your organization, to your people, to your processes, and to your technology.